Okay, now once the bill gets to the floor, and don't be distracted by the drawing yet. We'll come to this. We'll come to that drawing and look at it right now. It looks like it probably won't make very much sense. I promise you, it will. But first, let's talk about the Senate. So, a vote on a bill. So now the bill has gone to the floor of the Senate. Now, a vote can't take place in the Senate until debate ends. And as we talked about before in one of the other videos, ending debate in the United States Senate can be a very complicated thing. Well, here's how debate normally ends in the United States Senate, because there aren't these filibusters all the time. Usually, if I have Phil's corn law and I want to go ahead and have it voted on, what typically I'll wind up having to do is I'll have to go around to all my colleagues, all 100 colleagues in the United States Senate, and I'll say, hey, look, I have Phil's corn law. I'm going to be voting on it. How much time do you want to spend debating the bill and discussing the bill? Somebody might say, oh yeah, I want to spend 4 hours talking about it. Somebody else might say, I want to spend 3 hours. Somebody else might say, I want to spend 2 hours. I take down the list of all the different names of everybody who wants to talk about my bill. And then what I do is I go up to, when it comes time to actually debate my bill and discuss my bill. This has happened because this is what happens when I use this high-tech stuff. I'm just in my living room. This is on my wall. Right? But I don't usually let students in my house. But here you are. So what will happen is I'll go ahead and I say to the presiding officer, I'd like to begin debate on Phil's corn law, and I'd like to agree that this senator is going to speak for this many hours, this senator is going to speak for that many hours, and list everybody who wants to talk about it. If some people want to propose amendments, I say, and so-and-so is going to propose an amendment, so-and-so is going to propose an amendment. I just have to give everybody to agree to it. And that's why if you look on your notes, you'll see it says unanimous consent. That's what's called a unanimous consent agreement. I need to get everybody in the United States Senate to go ahead and agree to the rules. There is no rules committee in the Senate. There's no rules committee. Everybody has to agree to the rules, right? So I get up and I say, I would like, because unanimous consent just means everybody agrees. So I have to get up and say, Mr. President, because that's what you call the guy who's running the Senate. Mr. President, I move that we begin debate and then vote on Phil's corn law. Here are all the senators that want to go ahead and propose amendments. This is how long they want to talk. The presiding officer will say what the presiding officer always says. Are there any objections? You listen. No objections? Good, we can start debating Phil's corn law. That's the way it normally goes. Now, the alternative is that I have to invoke cloture. This is what we talked about last time. That if I know that there are people who want to filibuster my bill, then I've got to go ahead and invoke cloture. And once again, as we talked about in the last video, if I can invoke cloture, right, what that means is debate is going to be limited to 30 hours. There can be no other matters discussed. We just have to dispense with my bill. We got to just do my bill and then be done with it. And all amendments have to be germane. They have to be germane. They have to be relevant. And remember, they don't normally have to be relevant in the United States Senate. They always do in the House. In the Senate, they can be non-germane. They can be about anything. But once you've invoked cloture, all amendments have to be germane. Now we can finally vote on my bill. And so if we vote on the bill and it gets majority support, boom, it's done. Phil's corn law has made it through the House and it's made it through the Senate, and I'm exhausted. Now, one more wrinkle yet. The bill can't necessarily go to the president. Now you're wondering, well, wait a minute, it passed the House and it passed the Senate. Well, let's look over here. Suppose the bill that passes the House, let's look over here. Suppose the bill that passes in the House, I'm going to call that Phil's Corn Law 1, is in the exact same bill that passes in the Senate. In other words, the House did its bill, marked it up, it passed one version of Phil's Corn Law, and then in the Senate, when the Senate went through the process, it wound up passing the exact same law. If they both pass it, the exact same bill, and I mean the exact same bill, same every sentence, every comma, everything, it has to be the same. Not 99%, not 99.2%, the exact same thing. If they pass the exact same law, then what it does is it goes to the president. And now the president can decide whether he or she wants to go ahead and sign the bill. That's one way that it can get signed off. Or if let's say that the Senate slightly changed the bill. So the bill that the Senate passed was Phil's Corn Law 2. Right? What can also happen, that's very hard to see, but just trust me that I wrote that down. Here, let me try it again. Phil's Corn Law 2. Is that any better? Okay, Phil's Corn Law 2. So let's say the House passes Phil's Corn Law 1. The Senate changes it slightly. In committee, they add something. They do something slightly different. They pass something different. Can it go to the president? Well, no, because they added something to the bill that wasn't in the House bill. What can happen is Phil's Corn Law 2 can just go back to the House and they can vote on it. And if they say, okay, you know what, we're cool with that change, we got no problems with that, they go ahead and they pass Phil's Corn Law 2. Now it can go to the president too for a signature or a veto or whatever the president decides to do. Right? But they both have to pass the same bill. If it doesn't get support, if the bill that passes the House is different than the bill that passes the Senate, then this entirely different process takes place. Okay, so here we have a situation where the House, the Senate has passed Phil's, well, I got this backwards, but bear with me, I've got this a little bit backwards, but the same process. Here, let's just do it this way and fix it. Okay, sorry that I've got my back to you, but for our purposes, that's still not good enough. Hang on. That's still not good enough. Okay, just when you make your notes, remember that the House has passed Phil's Corn Law 1. See, I have 2, and the Senate passes Phil's Corn Law 2. Do I have to change this? No, just write that down. Just make sure that you understand this. So here's the way it works. The House passed Phil's Corn Law 1, despite what I have written up here. The House passed Phil's Corn Law 1. Then it went over to the Senate, and the Senate passed Phil's Corn Law 2. Now they both passed different versions of the same bill. Well, it can't go to the president then, because it can only go to the president if they pass the exact same thing. So what happens then is they go ahead and they get together what's called a conference committee. That's what the CC stands for. That's the conference committee. And then what the conference committee is that the Speaker of the House and the chairman and ranking member of the committee where the bill came from, so in our case, the House Agricultural Committee, and then the Senate Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee, the Speaker of the House, the chairman, and the ranking member of the relevant committees are going to go ahead and they're going to appoint people from the House and from the Senate to be as part of this conference committee. So it's just going to be a bunch of people from the House coming, a bunch of people from the Senate coming and getting together. For what purpose? To try and find a compromise. To try and find a compromise between Phil's Corn Law 1 and Phil's Corn Law 2. Now, the way it works is if they get together and they cannot come up with any compromise, the House is like, we like Phil's Corn Law 1. And the Senate's like, we like Corn Law 2. Right? And they just won't compromise. They don't like the other version and they just won't do it. If there's no compromise, the bill dies. It's gone through that whole process through the House, through the Senate. If they can't come up with a compromise in the conference committee, the bill dies. But what happens if they do come up with a compromise? So let's say, in this case, I have them come up with a compromise. The compromise is Phil's Corn Law 1.5, something in between the two. Seems reasonable. So let's go ahead and assume they say, okay, they get to the conference committee. All the people from the House come there. All the people from the Senate, whoever gets appointed to go to this committee, they sit there and they talk and they debate. And there's no subcommittees, by the way, for this committee. This is just a group of people, and they're only there to discuss that one bill. If they go ahead and they agree to a compromise, Phil's Corn Law 1.5, then the bill, because the House hasn't passed Phil's Corn Law 1.5, and neither has the Senate. What happens then is Phil's Corn Law 1.5 goes back to the House. Now don't worry, the process doesn't start all over. The House can either vote yes or no on 1.5. They can't amend it, they can't change it, they can't do anything. They can either vote yes or no. Same thing with the Senate. The bill goes back to the Senate. They can't amend it, they can't change it, they can either vote yes or no. If both of them, if the House passes Phil's Corn Law 1.5 and the Senate doesn't, it's dead. If the Senate passes it and the House doesn't, it's dead. But if they both pass it, and that says Phil's Corn Law 1.5, it's kind of hard to see, so when you're writing out your diagram, make it a little neater than this. But if they both pass Phil's Corn Law 1.5, now they both pass the exact same bill, what happens? Now it can go to the president. So again, if they pass the same version, they both pass Phil's Corn Law 1, or if the Senate passes Phil's Corn Law 2, the House might just go ahead and take it and say, okay, we're cool with that, and pass it themselves. As long as they both pass the same bill, it can go to the president. But over here, if the House and Senate have passed different versions, and they just won't, they can't agree on something, they get together at a conference committee. And the conference committee is just people from the House and the Senate, and they go ahead and try and come up with a compromise. If they can't come up with a compromise, the bill's dead. If they can't come up with a compromise, the bill goes back to the House for a vote, no amendments, back to the Senate for a vote, no amendments, and if they both pass it, then it can go to the president. Now, our bill hasn't become a law yet, but it's made it through the big part of the journey. The next part, we'll talk about the role of the president, and that will be in how a bill becomes a law, 0.05.